Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
This would be the group of people that didn't go to KubeCon.
That
Which
would be my guess.
they had a pretty decent attendance there from the meeting earlier this week,
Yeah.
but not a lot of overlap. Like Phil was there, Akihiro was there, Michael Brown was there, not AWS Michael Brown, say that way. And then I think there were a good number of people that were Containerd versus Podman and other groups that were just, they don't come to this, but they all wanted to get together and chat for a little bit. Say, while we're waiting for folks to show up, the little bit of recap on that one was two main topics. One was digest algorithms, where there are folks that are looking for how do we upgrade the algorithm, SHA-512, anything that is post-quantum, or at least fulfills those requirements that are coming down the pipeline for different folks. And so I'll let them know that I am working on the conformance test, and that's kind of one of the prerequisites. I found an interesting bug the other day, which was that I will push, let's see, I probably have this up on a window that I can share. It might be easier that way. Let me see where I've got this. I do have this. Okay. Sharing a screen. So the SHA-512 blob mount against the distribution project, and this was the newer version of it. I think this was a V3 build of it, where I will first push to repo 2, SHA-512 blob, send it up there. Of course, I'm able to push it up there and I'm able to confirm it and say, here's your digest, SHA-512, yada, 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 at the end of that. And it comes back to me and says, oh, by the way, here's your SHA-256. So not great, but it's up there. It pushed. I'm even able to mount it. And so I go over there and say, let me do the cross repository blob mount with this digest from this other repo. And it comes back and says, yeah, I did it. 201, it's there. Here's the digest even this time. It gave me the SHA-512 and the location of the SHA-512 over there, which would make you think it's there. And then I go do a head request on it or a get request on it. And it's just like 500. Unknown error. Don't know what's going on. Can't touch this thing. So yeah, that was one of those I was not expecting because I'm able to do other stuff of just doing a regular push and pull and whatnot, and those all work. But the cross repository blob mount did not. So here's an example of sending one up with a post request, a stream input, and then at the end of that saying, here's your 512. Again, it comes back with a 256 and everything, but then I can go right back and say to a get on the 512, and it says, here you go, here's all your data. It comes right back. Again, it still says e-tag SHA-256.
Does the SHA-256 actually work?
I do not test that. That's not part of my conformance.
Mm.
But I do a get on the 512, and it responds with that.
Yep.
So when I'm thinking through all the stuff that is happening from the KubeCon where they're saying they want to change digest algorithms, I immediately think to that I was running into this past week of thinking that as we go through and do this, there are going to be a lot of these edge cases there where people just haven't had this stuff before hitting their registries, and they'll think it might work just with a simple test, and then they start digging into it, and we're going to find a lot of edge cases out there, I'm sure. big one is manifest. If you push a tag manifest, there's no way to push the digest for that. That'll be the pull request that I've got sitting out there in draft state right now. That'll have to get solved at some point there. Hey, we got Sam joining us too. Welcome, Sam.
Hello. I wasn't sure if we would actually have a meeting today, but I guess there's enough people that are not at KubeCon, so
It was your mic is terrible, but the overlap between the two, I would say it's a lot of the people that can't make it to this meeting that were at KubeCon, and so we didn't bother canceling this.
is the
But
mic
you were
any
there.
better now, or is it still terrible?
It's better now. Not sure
Okay.
what was going on there. It was some digital funkiness going on.
Well, I changed nothing, so
Sometimes that's all it takes. Muting and unmuting. So I was giving them a bit of the recap on KubeCon, mentioned that we've got digest algorithms people want to talk about, seeing how the progress there. And the other big topics was the alternative to tar. That was me simplifying it. They were talking about different packaging methods. And there were folks who are looking at this from different directions. A lot of them were going back to, hey, we got these giant AI models being pushed to the registry. How do we efficiently do that? And I'm not sure there is an efficient way to do that if AI models don't have a nice delta. I don't know what the delta in two different builds of an AI model looks like. If everything changes in there, all the numbers change a little bit. I don't think there's a good way to package that. But if they do have a nice delta solution over there, then I think that would work pretty decently. But there were discussions on, different file system formats, whether we could do some kind of block level delta versus file system level delta, that sort of thing. Ryan, I saw you jumping off mute there. Did you have thoughts on that?
Oh no, I think I've been sitting off mute for a minute.
Okay. All right. So other than that, let's see. While folks are here, I don't know. We don't think we have anybody that really is too much. Oh, I know why I look like you jumped. Rom showed up. Hey there, Rom. Got to keep track of everybody that's
Hello.
coming here. Gotta spell it right. After all this time of typing it, I gotta spell it right. So yeah, I wanted to ask if this is ready. I don't know why I already had it open here. Is this ready to merge? Going all the way back to number 66. And the folks here that might have opinions are not here today. But I'm thinking after this meeting, no one says anything. Over the years, people have checked this and said, looks good. And then over the past couple weeks, we finally got two maintainers at once that checked it. And so I feel like unless Mike says he has any concerns, I'm honestly ready to hit the merge button on this one. And to remind folks what this was, is this is putting the namespace parameters on a client that is doing a pull-through request on a proxy. So if it talks to a server that is not the ultimate server that is supposed to receive the request, it's supposed to pull a namespace parameter on there. It says, hey, I'm talking to proxy.example.org. I'm trying to get to dockerhub.io. And please handle my request appropriately. And so it's just documents all of that. Our different settings in there. Got some implementers notes. So unless folks have a concern, this PR that has been sitting out here since going way back to, where's the date stamp? 2019. I think we're ready to merge it.
So for the registry implementers, what is the implication of this?
So are you an implementer of a pull-through proxy?
Uh, mm, yeah.
If you happen to be an implementer of pull-through, I don't know if, I haven't looked this out in a little while. I can't remember if you've got that functionality over there. If you are, then this just documents that when clients are connecting to you, you can be a pull-through proxy for more than one registry on the same port. And this documents how you do that. That clients will connect to you and say, hey, I'm connecting to you on port 5000. I know you're a proxy server, you're proxy.example.org, but I'm trying to go to Docker Hub. I'm trying to go to GitHub Container Registry. I'm trying to go to pick your upstream registry of choice. And you pass that through as a namespace, and the registry is, the pull-through proxy is supposed to know at that point, oh, they're asking for this image on this registry. So before then, the only way we've had to do this is that every pull-through proxy was specific for one registry, and they would not tell the registry where they're going. The pull-through proxy just said, I only serve this one upstream registry.
Okay.
And this doesn't break that case. If anybody still implements the old way, the client configuration might pass an extra header along, but you've probably already seen that if someone's on Containerd today and it hadn't broken anything, because Containerd has been doing this for a while. This just gives you the option to add extra functionality of putting all the proxy stuff behind a single port.
So what are the authentication and authorization implications of this?
So implementer's note. Authorization credentials for the upstream registry should not be sent to the proxy unless explicitly configured or instructed to do so by the credential owner.
Okay, so there is a configuration piece. Okay.
That is up to the client and the pull-through proxy. I have really wanted to implement myself a pull-through proxy that also does pull-through credentials. In other words, you as the client would be configured, talk to this proxy, and also send your normal upstream credentials to the proxy for whatever registry you're talking to. And the proxy then could go to the upstream registry, pull private images if it needs to, but then knows that, hey, I pulled those images with these credentials. Let me only respond if someone with credentials access that thing tries to get the same data.
Okay.
I've yet to have a chance to write that, but I think that would be a cool project. And if anyone wants to beat me to it, go for it. All right, so this is my official kind of last call. If no one says anything, probably later today, I'm likely to hit the merge button on that one. I think it's been sitting out, 2019. I think it's been out for long enough. Feel like we've had a chance to chat about that. All right, next one on my agenda here was just kind of a question the brain cell started spinning around last night and just kind of went through my head of, is there some kind of threshold in OCI where we should unlist an implementation? In other words, we've got implementations listed in our projects today. I'll pull image spec, for example, just because that's the one higher up on my visibility list here, where we've got documented all these people implement image spec. And we've gone through and checked that and said, here they are, we've documented this. And my question that I kind of want to raise, I'm not sure I'll get an answer, but just kind of letting people think about it for a little bit, is there some kind of threshold where we should say, you know what? They said they are an OCI implementation, but maybe we don't want to list them anymore. And I'm kind of curious what the team thinks of is there some kind of threshold where that might be something we want to consider? And I put a couple examples here, like if someone made an intentionally incompatible implementation, or they make their client do something that's intentionally going to do something wrong, or even worse, if they design their tool in such a way that when it talks to an OCI conformant tool, you get data loss in the process, something like that.
Yeah,
And I'm
would it
not
help?
so much sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, would it help if instead of just saying these people implement this, actually say they implement 2.1 or 2.0 or whatever, kind of like a badge system?
Yeah, I didn't want to jump into saying, hey, if you implement only 1.0, like I haven't gotten to that point in this, because if you just said I'm only going to implement 1.0, I think that is perfectly valid even when we're upstream another version or two. But that's probably a perfectly good thing to do, to say, hey, they've implemented an old version. I'm more worried if someone looks at the spec and says, you know what, I've got different ideas. I want to innovate a completely different direction than the spec went, and I'm going to make an incompatible solution.
Like in addition to the APIs, or just like, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do something different.
I'm thinking that's where I'm trying to figure out where to draw the line, because I think there's ways people can do innovation within the specs framework. We've got, different annotations you can put on manifest. We've got all different ways you can extend the API with our extensions in the distribution spec. You can put other fields inside of JSON. There's places in there we've said that you can innovate, and so I'm more thinking along the lines of, where is that line in terms of how much can they innovate outside of many of those boundaries?
So this list of implementations, right? So where is this list? Because we have three specs, right? Disk spec, runtime, and image spec. So,
Yeah, I picked on image spec.
okay.
Distribution spec has a convenient conformance test where we just outright list. You pass conformance test 1.0 and put you on the web page. But image spec, we just have people that chime in and say, hey, I've got a solution that implements image spec. Can I be listed? And we've got a few things we've kind of taken off the list, not because they're doing something wrong, but because the project's been archived. So we kind of put them down on a lower level there. But somewhat I'm thinking of this from a user standpoint. If I'm a user that's looking for implementations and I want to make sure this works with my other OCI tools, are we trying to give a list of saying, here are the projects that OCI has acknowledged that would work with other OCI tools in a compatible way?
To the best of our knowledge, I think. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we want to. So the list that you have, they may be compatible for a particular version. That's what the point was raised. The second thing is, do we want to get into this business of policing? Is the other question. So they were on this list because they were compatible at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Then beyond that, do you want to do more policing on this?
I don't think I want to do active policing, but if we've been made aware that, hey, some project is doing something that is intentionally incompatible, is there some kind of line that we would say, you know what? We can't tell them not to do that, but we can at least stop recommending it to the people that come here looking at the projects.
So in this case, we're specifically, sorry, Tina, I saw you unmuted. Why don't you go ahead?
I don't know if my comment is particularly helpful, but I think this is going to be a more fruitful discussion if we have an example of someone who's done this.
I mean, there's Docker, which does stuff like, at least historically, like health check, uh, where it's not even necessarily a violation of the image spec, but it is in addition to the runtime spec, but it requires changes that are out of spec for the image spec as well. So it's kind of,
But the spec is designed to allow things like that to exist, right?
yeah.
I think Brandon is maybe looking at more malicious cases, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm also trying to be intentionally non-picking on any individual group or project, and so I'm saving any individual criticism for this. But also, I don't think I've seen anyone that's completely crossed this line. But there have been things I've seen out there that have just said, it just feels like it's not playing nice in the sandbox sometimes. And so I just want to figure out, where do we want to draw the line? Because I don't know that I've got an example where someone has crossed what line I'm thinking of, which would be way, way far along. But maybe people look at this and say, you know what? We came with a 1.1 spec. If someone isn't going to implement 1.1, let's take them off the list. And that would be kind of a whole different end of the extreme than what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of what I was going to say is like there's extensions that people take to the spec, and it's like it is hard to innovate if you're not allowed to deviate from the spec at all. And at the same time, OCI doesn't implement. OCI is follow a trailing spec, so you you can't, like, if you can't add to the spec, then you can't, or if you can't add extra features, then you can't get it upstreamed into OCI either. So uh, yeah, it's a weird
Yeah.
place.
I'm not so worried about people that add new functionality to test things out. I'm more worried about people that intentionally detract from functionality that OCI starts implementing.
Mhm.
They see we go one direction. They say, you know what, you zigged, we're going to zag over here. We're going to make something that just works completely different. So, like I say, I didn't think I was going to get so much of an answer, but I at least kind of wanted to get some people noodling on the thoughts there.
And for people who are watching later, I'm not picking on Docker. I used to work there, and I worked there when they did health checks. Just was an example.
I'm thinking of other examples, and I don't want to list them just because I'm trying to be polite.
Yeah.
Are your
All
other
right.
examples listed in that implementations list?
Potentially. All right. Next up on the agenda here, we can always circle back to the previous topics. Folks want to chat about them some more. But Ron C wanted to chat about LLM policies, and I kind of wanted to raise this visibility wise of whether that might be something we want to do across more than just Run C, but multiple open container projects of, do we need a policy? And there's a lot of discussion over here on, do we want a policy? What should the policy be? And I'm just thinking it's happening across the ecosystem, so it might be a good thing to discuss across more than just Run C.
I have extremely strong personal opinions about LLMs. And even with those, this feels like a witch hunt to me. I've seen a lot of cases in open source where one open source maintainer levies an accusation against another that their words were AI generated when they may or may not have been. And I don't think that's okay. And so this kind of bothers me, actually. I would love to be able to say, yes, no LLMs, totally banned, not acceptable. But I don't think that's realistic or reasonable, because I don't think we can accurately tell. There are obviously clues, but at the end of the day, we don't know exactly how someone arrived at this message or this contribution.
So I would split it into two parts. One is there a policy? And the second is, how would we enforce that policy? Because I kind of agree with you. Enforcing that policy is not easy. I had a PR earlier this week where they split the implementation and documentation, because I've got my documentation over in a different repo for the website. And I went looking through all the documentation they had, and as I was going through it, I was seeing they documented a whole bunch of features they didn't actually implement. There was a whole bunch of syntax. They started going through documenting how the Semver filtering syntax was working. And they were documenting a whole bunch of different notations that weren't at all in the implementation that they provided to me. So either they didn't remember what they implemented, or they did some kind of pasting from somewhere. I don't know where it came from, but it rose my suspicion. And rather than trying to go through and saying you're banned or something like that, I ended up making another PR just because I needed to make another PR anyway on top of that. So handled it my own way. But I'm thinking there's a separation of, can you enforce it and maybe not? But also, is there something, maybe there should be a note that just says, hey, if you're contributing, we expect it to be you and not the LLM you're running. And that would just be the contributor guide versus us enforcing it.
I had something similar come up where a colleague was running totally kind of a research thing, running LLMs against projects to increase test coverage and just kind of repeatedly doing it over and over and over, generated a bunch of possibly good tests, but they aren't familiar with that project. And so it's kind of the things like the code may be totally fine, but you go and submit it, and then now you're expecting everybody to review this and you don't even know what the code is. It's kind of weird. It's a weird situation. And in, I think a case like what you had brought up is like, but are you even allowed to sign off on this work? Because like you're saying that your DCO signing this, saying that you're allowed to submit this work, and maybe it's not even your work.
Yeah, I've asked the question in the past of people that spend more time researching this than not. I think the thing I saw from the output of the various LLM tools out there is that the output has no copyright on it. Like someone cannot copyright it. But that when you're assigning the DCO just says no one else has a copyright on this. So technically, I think they're okay to sign that. But at the same time, it would be a lot better if they were the one that wrote it and they knew that no one.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of issues here. One is stuff like people generating issues through LLMs that they don't even know what the issue is. They didn't reproduce it, and there may actually be a problem, or there may not be. It's just the LLM thought there was, and someone opens it up. And I think that comes down to basically karma. Like you open up stuff and you didn't actually validate the error. At that point, we're just gonna kind of treat your issues with lower.
Trust.
We're gonna give them less credence.
Yeah.
And less time.
But to your point, Tianon, I tend to agree enforcing this is not easy. I don't really expect to put too much effort on the enforcing. It's more just on the outward documentation of how can we tell users our expectations.
Yeah, as long as that expectation is clear among maintainers that this is not a tool for witch hunting, that this is a tool to inform contributors on expectation, then fine. I think policy is the wrong word for that because policy is inherently a tool for enforcement.
Fair point.
Sam.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a full opinion on this, but there is a Linux Foundation policy on LLM contributions that are code contributions. And that's something that we kind of have to follow kind of regardless because we are a sub-foundation of the Linux Foundation. If we're worried about something, I see that this is, just part of the run C repo, right? And you're looking at it from maybe just a run C perspective. I don't know if there's something that we should do at the TOB level to enforce, maybe enforce is the wrong word, to have sort of a uniform stance on what it looks like here. I agree with a lot of what you were saying about this shouldn't be used as a tool for witch hunting. I also see that there's a lot of comment on here and reactions on here from people that are not involved in the TDC on a regular basis. So
Yeah,
That's it.
apparently it made top story on Hacker News, and so we got a whole bunch of peanut gallery.
Yep.
That'll do it. Yeah. To your point there, Sam, of whether it needs to be something up at the TOC level, I wasn't going quite that far, but I was moving that direction. So that's kind of the idea that I was pushing for, is rather than do this on a project by project, if this was something more global and open containers.
I think it seems like it might be
Yeah.
a multi-project scope of, which is kind of what the TOP is responsible for.
Does that mean that we have to have a meeting?
Do we need to have a decision on this? If we need to have a decision on this, then yeah, probably we'll call a meeting. Of course, it's, November. End of the year ends up being pretty hard for those kinds of things, but we can do it anyway.
I'm just laughing because I think it's like that would be the first in however many years. I've never seen one since I've been around in that process.
Well, we haven't really needed them, so.
We truly haven't. Yeah. And Brian, that is the concern a lot of people have. I mean, I looked through all the documentation that the person submitted me. I was like, this looks really good. They spent a lot of time going through this. And then I dug a little deeper and said they just documented a whole bunch of features that users are going to expect me to support that they never actually implemented at all. Like, they just invented them out of the blue here, but they never implemented them, which can be a challenge if you're trying to support some of this stuff. All right. Last one for the agenda today, at least for my agenda, and others, the agenda document's open if y'all want to put something on there. You're welcome to. Or we can always free chat in here. But chatting again about the refers and the image layout, mostly just because Tianon jumped in there and was just like, yeah, I'm a big knack on this. So I want to make sure that you're a knack on my specific implementation, not on the general idea that we should try to support refers in the image layout.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
On the debate of whether or not refers in the image layout should be an index in the index.json or whether it should be the individual refers, I don't think the image spec should specify one way or the other. I think they're both valid and they both have valid use cases.
So if we make an annotation, I feel like we should specify what that annotation means.
Yes, but I don't think we should make an annotation.
Oh, come on. We got to do something.
Do we? I don't think we do.
I want compatibility between projects. I want my stuff, if I export it, for ROM to be able to pull it in, load it into Zot, and it just suddenly appears with all the refers attached to the content that you loaded in there. That was a sad little hint to ROM of maybe he's had a chance to test this, but I'm guessing he hadn't.
No, I did test this. At least the instructions that are over here, yes, I did test it. I should probably put the output of that in this.
Does it work, or do you have an
does.
idea?
It does work, but I'm trying to validate if all the fields and things like that are correct.
So was your testing what Zod is doing today, or was your testing of could Zod implement one of the solutions we were talking about here?
What it does today.
Okay. And so do you put your refers in there as individual entries in the index.json, or do you put the refers response in there? I should probably just let you put your own little, when you get a chance, let you do that. I did throw this back to your concern there, Tinon. When I threw this back to draft state, it was intentional because I was seeing a lot of people that were doing different solutions. Or us did it one way, Reg Client did another way, or the Reg did another way, Build Kit did another way. We'll find out if that's doing it a third way. Container D was probably a little closer to the way Oris was doing it. So different folks were trying to do it different ways. Although I did find it kind of, I don't want to say concerning, but eyebrow raising when you said that, hey, we shouldn't have an annotation for this because we've got the fallback tag and you're making this look so much like the fallback tag. And I'm thinking, well, the whole idea of the fallback tag was that it was supposed to look so much like the referrer's response.
I'm saying for your use case of wanting to have an OCI layout that represents a registry on disk, the fallback tag in ref.name seems like it's exactly the same as the annotation you're proposing to add.
It completely is. It's
identical.
They are identical. That's
Except
ideally
that
what I'm looking for.
The ref.name can have a repository name where subject wouldn't, right?
No, the exception is when I do a tag listing, I don't see all the refers in there.
Right. So that could be your implementation detail of not listing those ref names because they are ref names for refers.
I could have gone that way, but I went the other direction of saying, let me move this into an annotation so that I don't have, so that anything that's in there with a tag name, it comes up in the tag listing. Anything that doesn't have a tag name, it's got other ways we're accessing it.
Yeah. I guess I'm not as concerned about the differing implementations because they are all compliant with the spec. They're all valid. None of them are wrong. They're all correct.
So let's go back to when we should start kicking projects out of OCI now.
Okay. Let's go back to that witch hunt.
We've got multiple projects here that have all implemented refers and OCI layouts, and none of us are talking together. We're all implementing something from an end user point of view. If I create an OCI layout in one tool and I try to use it in another tool, I would expect that I don't have data loss in the process.
Maybe I shouldn't say something so controversial, but I think refers were a failure. I think the entire addition to the spec was a failure of the OCI. I like the feature. I enjoy the functionality that it provides. I don't think that was the way to get it. And the reason that I'm saying this now that feels like a total non sequitur is because I think what you're seeing in that fracturing behavior is a symptom of that failure.
When we had originally done it, I think the question came up of, do we need anything for the OCI layout? And the knee-jerk reaction I had was, there's nothing needed because an OCI layout is like a V1 registry. It can't implement an API, so we'll just use the fallback tag. So I didn't even think that we even needed to document that. And I agree, we made a mistake that we probably should have spent the time to document it. So this is where I'm trying to rectify that.
Okay, let me change tacks here. I would say somewhere around 90% of the OCI layouts that I interact with on a regular basis are ones that I have created by hand, not ones that I have created with a tool. The referrers API is designed to either create that response from the registry automatically based on manifests that are pushed and whether or not they have a subject field, or barring support from the registry by the tool or client performing the push to a registry. I have neither of those things in most of the OCI layouts I create. They're often created with JQ and bash. I'm not using a tool. And so I would not ever even consider creating the fallback refers index response in my OCI layouts, because that's not my job as a creator of content. That's the job of a tool that pushes to a registry or of a registry.
And I don't think you're alone in that. I think looking back to the responses, Containerd, Oris, and others, they're on that same mental plane with you. And so that's where I'm looking back to the community of saying, let's come to an agreement here. I'm fine if the community says we're all going this direction. I've come up with ideas before and they've been turned down by OCI. That's why you have a group of people and everybody comes in there with their own ideas. I'm just looking to make sure we get the consistent idea between all the projects. And so if we go the direction of everybody listing individual things in there, I will implement that. The only concern that I raise in doing that is that it turns into a third path for code that's implementing these solutions. Because they've got one path and they're talking to a registry that's got refers enabled. There's a second path and they're talking to registries that don't have refers enabled. And now we're making a third path when they work with an OCI layout that has the content, where there was the possibility to merge those second and third cases. But if other people aren't facing that challenge, I'm not going to throw up a whole big roadblock here and say we can't do it the other way. I just want to make sure that people see it. That is, we're creating a third path. They'll say, yeah, we acknowledge that. We're doing it anyway. And we go down that path. But yeah, when I looked at all the different ways people were implementing this, I was not expecting to be incompatible with Oras and what Containerd was talking about doing on their side and everybody else at once. That was the eye-opening part for me when I saw how incompatible all the tools were. All right, everybody else got quiet. Ram, I'm guessing you're probably, oh, you did. After side loading, let's see. Okay, so you used Oras to populate, and when you side load, you're able to get refers out of it.
Yeah, it looks right. It's an index. It comes back as an index as per the specs.
Mm-hmm. And so the way Oras does theirs is they just have individual entries in there. And so you just see the manifest, you'll parse those manifests and import them in.
Yeah.
Where I'm guessing if you put it in from the output of build kit or the output of reg client, you probably wouldn't see this.
Yeah.
Although,
yeah, that's something I will test also.
Okay. Reg client you might support. It ships as a whole, the refers response there, so the individual manifests are there. So depending on how you're generating this, if you just send in to the refers response and pull in those individual manifests, you might see it that way.
Yeah, I'll test that. So now coming back to this question, so this is also an opportunity to nudge all these ecosystems to a common place if we agree on a common place.
Very much so. So my question honestly is if you were to output an OCI layout that content with referrers in there, what would your output look like? Because your backend storage, you use the OCI layout, don't you?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. So this, it may break with other tools. That's what I'll test them. So
Yeah. So I'm thinking you're using this as sideload and input, but there's also the, hey, if somebody pushes a bunch of content, you've logged in the back end to an OCI layout, and then someone goes directly into the back end and tries to pull it out that way. I'll be curious what that looks like as well.
okay, we'll report back.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. All right. That's the end of my list. I ran through all my items here. At least all the confrontational ones. Anybody else have stuff you want to chat about? Or just feel the FOMO of not being at KubeCon this week? All right. Going once, going twice. I think we're good to call it an end of the day. So have a great rest of your week for everybody here. And we'll cycle back next week.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.